President Obama just gave his first speech in a mosque in America since he's been the president in almost 7 years. And he made some very good comments. He made comments in terms of highlighting the history of Muslims in America, starting with the first enslaved Africans that came here. He mentioned Thomas Jefferson explicitly mentioning the rights of all people to freely worship God in America, including Muslims or so-called Mohammedans. And he mentioned also the vast diversity of the American Muslim community, that we are in all walks of life, from doctors, educators, to sports stars such as Muhammad Ali and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. So these are wonderful things. I'm glad that in a way that he finally did visit a mosque in America since president, given that he had years back in the early part of his presidency had visited the Al-Azhar University in Cairo, Egypt. He visited mosques in Turkey and in other places. So he did finally get around to it with less than a year in office. However, as the president did speak out explicitly against Islamophobia, what he also did do was passively affirmed, or he passively reinforced some Islamophobia. And I'll tell you how. Why is it that on the one visit that the president comes to a mosque, he has to discuss with American Muslims the issue of global terrorism? On one hand, the president says that we Muslims are Americans like everyone else and then part of the fabric of the society. Then he wants to mention what goes on halfway across the world or in Paris, in which American Muslims aren't responsible for. There are other religious groups that do terrorism explicitly. For instance, Christian groups. The Lord's Resistance Army is one of those that comes to my mind, which is a quasi-Christian organization. And or we have Christian militias who've been committing ethnic cleansing against Muslims, telling Muslims convert or die. But those types of discussions are never done in churches. And of course, Christians who are Americans are never asked to condemn those, or that's not discussed in their churches, as it shouldn't be, because it would be ludicrous to discuss that to Christian Americans. Well, I think that also discussing this with American Muslims, or making this in his one trip to a mosque where he has to invoke this, is just reconnecting or reaffirming the framework that every time we have to discuss Muslims, there also has to be a discussion about terrorism. Okay, and if we are going to talk about terrorism, then let's be real about it. Let's talk about it from empirical data about who kills Americans, how Americans die, and terrorism. So, you know, if we're going to mention terrorism in a mosque, then, you know, why not go to the Church of Dylann Roof's family, which he believed that this country should be a white Christian nation? Or what about the Planned Parenthood shooting, where a guy held extreme evangelical views and shot up Planned Parenthood not long ago in Colorado Springs, as other Planned Parenthoods and places that offer female services have been attacked and bombed throughout the last couple of decades. So, you know, the president did passively reinforce a problematic framework that Muslims have to always be discussed within the framework of terrorism. And so as he explicitly tells Americans not to be bigoted against Muslims, he is unfortunately today, he's reinforcing a framework which then leads people to dehumanize Muslims and look at Muslims as somehow being more of a threat to national tranquility than any other group of Americans. And we know that, empirically speaking, from domestic terrorism statistics the last 2 decades to actually who commits mass shooting, that in no way do American Muslims constitute the majority of domestic terrorism or violence that kills Americans in the United States of America. I hope that the next president gets the language right and gets the framework right, because Mr. Obama still hasn't gotten it right.